I'm Brian Williams. I'm from Physicians Resource. I'm your new OSHA consultant. And by the way, thank you. I'm not just your consultant today or next year when I come back. All year long. Anytime any of you have a question about safety or health in the workplace, I am happy to provide you some information. Please call me, please email me. My card is in your OSHA compliance manual. By the way, this is all, I'm sure everyone has memorized this manual. This is your OSHA compliance manual. And my card is right here, inside, right there. So, please feel free to call me. Also, I want to let you know that there are CE credits available for what we're about to go through. You can get 2 OSHA compliance credits, as well as 1 infection control credit. I've already filled out a certificate with my name and signature and date. It's in the training records section of the back of the manual, but I didn't put your name on it. So if you want it, take it out, make a copy, put your name on it, do it whatever you want with that, and then put the original back in there, please. Also, in regard to this manual, if you ever need something from this manual, and it is yellow, for example, whatever this is right here, yellow, that's a master. Please never write on the master. It makes my job a headache. So, if you ever need it, take it out, make a copy of it, put it back in. Thank you. And then finally, I am not an OSHA compliance officer. I'm not an OSHA inspector. I'm your OSHA partner. I'm not here to turn you in for anything. I'm here to make sure everything looks good, that we stay at a level of compliance that the government would like. Okay? You guys need that? But I'm also here in case OSHA ever does decide to pay you a visit for an inspection. I want to be here to help you through that as well. Has that ever happened here?
I don't think so.
So let's keep it that way, but let's talk about what would happen if that ever did occur, that OSHA decided to pay you a visit. What do you do?
Call you.
Call me, okay, yes. Absolutely, call me. What else do you do?
Well, the front desk calls Nikki and Alana and David.
Okay.
And we ask them to wait patiently in the waiting room so you arrive.
Okay. Are you at the front desk?
Paige and I are sometimes.
You and Paige are at the front desk. Okay, good. So, all those things are correct, but the very first thing that I would ask you to do is ask for their identification. Ask for their state-issued federal identification. They should also have just a regular old business card, which should give the credentials. But make sure that they are who they say they are, and also ask what the purpose of their business is, purpose of their visit is today. They should give you some indication as to why they're here, although I've found, in my experience, some compliance officers are a little less giving of information than others. So they may not give you exactly the reason why they're here, but they should give you some sort of overview. For example, they may be here for a random inspection. That happens. They have territories and they may have some downtime, so they're in the area and they stop by and they say, hi, I want to inspect your facility. If that's the case, they are open to inspect everything. They can look at everything. But they also may be here because of a complaint. That's the most common reason for one of their visits. A complaint can come from any direction too. It could come from a patient or from an employee, former employee. It could come from a UPS driver. It could come from anywhere or any person. They are required to follow up on every complaint, no matter how bogus or true. That's generally the reason for their visit. If they're here for a complaint, try to find out what the complaint is before you ask them to take a seat. Hopefully they'll give you some information about that, but they may not. But at some point, definitely call me, call our office if I'm not around. Somebody will be on their way to help you through this process. Okay? Before I get here, whoever's doing the monthly checklists, or whoever has the monthly checklist where you do an inspection of the facility, I recommend that you do an inspection while this person is waiting in your waiting room. Just make sure everything looks like it should look. Okay? Other things that I recommend you do, at some point they're going to start the inspection. when they do start the inspection, someone needs to walk with that person, with the inspector, take notes, ask a lot of questions, gather as much information as possible. Never readily admit to any wrongdoing. Don't cop to any, oh yeah, I saw her do that. Don't offer any information. It's kind of like one of those crime shows where you're supposed to have your lawyer in the room or whatever. So make sure you take a picture of something. If you see the inspector take a picture of something, try to gather again as much information as possible. Hopefully I'll be here by that time. They also may ask to interview one or more of you individually. That can be scheduled out. The inspection itself will occur the day the inspector gets here. But the interviews can be scheduled out a couple weeks later. And for that, you can have somebody in that room with you. You could have a coworker, you could have your mom, you could have me in that room with you. You cannot have one of your supervisors or one of the owners in that room with you, but you can have any other person in that room with you, okay? I would recommend you have me, if you would like me in that room. Any questions about OSHA inspections? There is in your OSHA compliance manual, there are some documents that live right in the front cover. Take some of those out. One of them is a checklist for OSHA inspections, what to do. Kind of goes over everything we just talked about. And so if you forget everything that I just said, which I don't blame you, please refer to this right here. Okay, so your handout has 3 different sections. You're welcome to keep those, write on them, or give them back to me if you don't. If you don't want to write, you can just follow along. It's up to you. This usually takes about 55 minutes. So right now it's about 8:10. So we should get done around 9 or so. When's our first patients coming in? 9. Oh, they're coming in at 9. Okay. So, and how many patients are coming in at 9?
13.
Really?
I mean,
Is that true?
Could be more if we're doing IVs.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. Yep.
That's a lot. Okay. Section number 1, accident prevention program. Number 1, is your facility required to have a safety committee or a safety meeting monthly? Yes, you are. Because you have a lot of employees here. So you are required to have a committee, and you are required to have a meeting every month. Number 2, is your facility conducting a monthly safety inspection?
Yes.
Hope you are. And who's responsible for completing these inspections?
David?
I think so.
I love the assuredness that everyone feels that maybe it's David. So it could be David. David's not here, I'm guessing.
No.
But even if David is responsible, maybe David decides not to come to work for a month. I don't know David, but would he do that? Maybe he moves to Mexico. So someone will need to step up, and I do recommend sharing that responsibility of the monthly safety inspections, because it allows other people to be involved in safety and allows them to see the checklists and all the different things that need to be up to standard. So share that. Number 3, do you know how to evacuate this facility in the event of an emergency? I'm guessing no one stays here all night, every night, sleeps here. Everybody goes home. That means you've evacuated. Good job. Number 4, where do you meet outside this facility in the event you do have to evacuate? Where are you
Is
going to
it
meet?
Shepherd's
across?
Clinic
across the street.
Shepherd's Clinic. Okay. Who's the newest person in this room, newest employee?
It's either
Susan or
you
Maggie?
me.
Susan, how long?
2 weeks?
2 weeks.
You went.
How
Oh,
long?
3 months. So yeah, you're newer.
3 months? What's your name?
Maggie.
Maggie. Susan and Maggie. Did you both know that you meet over at the Shepherd's Pie or what's it called?
Shepherd's
Shepherd's
Clinic.
Shepherd's Clinic. So there we go. You've learned something. Your job is done. You can leave now. I'm kidding. So there may be some other things that we will learn today that you're not aware of, but that's a good reason we're having this meeting. Okay. Number 5. What is something, by the way, what is something important you should always take with you if you have to evacuate this facility? Shoes? Your shoes? I guess if you're not wearing them, maybe you should take your shoes. That's a good point.
Justin's not here.
What was that?
Justin's not here. He's the only one who needs shoes.
Okay. The phone, I heard somebody say phone, that's good. How about your patients?
Yep, fair, yeah.
I know, maybe even those patients. Yeah, take all your patients, please. Good. 5, are evacuation routes required to be posted here? I love all the silence. They are required to be posted here, yes. And hopefully they are. Are they?
We used
We
to.
used to. What happened to them?
Someone took them down. I think there might be one in the back.
There is one in the back.
Okay.
So evacuation route, pretty simple. It just shows you, you know, the hallways and the exits.
Oh, isn't that up in the laundry room?
Might be.
It should be marked where the fire extinguisher or fire extinguishers are, things like that.
Where do you need to post that?
It should be posted in a visible location in one of the main one of the main walkways here, one of the main aisles. Like this, I've never been here, so this is the main one, the main hallway. So probably just somewhere here in the main hallway. It could be right here by the thermostat or something like that. Some people frame them. It's artistic. 6, fire extinguisher review. How many fire extinguishers do we have?
1, 2.
I'm gonna say 4 or 5.
Yeah, I want to say
4 or 5. That's a lot.
I think it's 3.
4.
There's
No,
one in,
there's one.
suite.
There's 2 in the back. There's one in the laundry room.
There's one in the IV suite.
Yep, there's one in the front desk, and there's one right here.
Oh,
There's one right here?
Yep.
it's not a.
Oh, it's not a real one?
I mean, it's not a like a
Attached to the wall.
attached to the wall.
Oh, okay. Let's see.
But it's real.
Very good.
Portland Fire Department.
Yeah, they
They all
come.
need to be mounted, by the way.
It was mounted.
So, fire extinguishers. So for you new folks, it sounds like there are, how many do we say? 3, 4?
I think there's at least 4.
4.
Possibly
So it's a
5.
question mark as to how many we have. But we should know where those are located. And is there another level to this? So it's all on this one level?
Well, we have a suite across the street and we have a suite across the parking lot.
Oh, okay. Okay. So wherever you are within your place of business, you need to be within 75 feet of a fire extinguisher at all times. That's the rule. So if you have 3 or 4 here and you feel like you could have one centrally located where you're always within 75 feet, that means you could relieve yourself of 1 or 2 of those. So give that some thought. And there's an acronym there that helps you operate a fire extinguisher. PASS. What does PASS stand for? Anyone? This is group participation. Prevent.
Squeeze, sweep.
Squeeze and sweep. Yes. Hold the pin, aim at the base of the fire, squeeze the operating handle, and sweep back and forth, side to side. Here's your handy dandy reminder, by the way. Right there you go. Has anyone operated a fire extinguisher in this room?
Yes.
Did I see your head nod right there? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
What's your name?
Chloe.
Chloe. Tell me about when you operated it.
Oh, it was just for school. If we had to learn how to use it.
Oh, you
So we
just
did
learned how to use it?
Yeah.
Okay.
We just did it in the
That's cool.
parking lot.
You know, people ask me, Brian, you know, we've run out of safety meeting topics. We have nothing else to talk about. Here's an idea for a safety meeting. You could have, many local businesses have a fire department or fire personnel come out to their business and do a demonstration of a fire extinguisher, kind of similar probably to what Chloe did. They'll take you outside, they'll start a little controlled fire, they'll have a fire extinguisher and you get to play around with it. Plus, the firemen come to your business if that is of interest to any of you. So. Okay, 7, when activating the extinguisher, where do you aim? You aim at the base of the fire. Aim for the fuel, not the flames. And number 8, how far back from the fire should you stand when using the extinguisher? 6 to 10 feet, safe distance. The bigger the fire, the further away you should stand. And 9, during monthly fire extinguisher inspections, what tasks are performed? So the first thing you do is you look at that little pin or the gauge and make sure the needle is in the green section. Green means good. Okay. And then the pin should still be in the handle with the little zip tie security. And finally, there is a tag on every fire extinguisher. Can I see that one for a second, please? Thank you. There's a tag on every fire extinguisher. And here's the gauge, by the way, with the needle and the green, which is good. There's the pin. This tag should be,
2008.
this tag should show that the fire extinguisher was serviced within the last year.
All of our others are, because they come
I
every
believe that.
year.
I believe that. So this was serviced 12 years ago. So I think we could probably get
We're
rid
pretty
of
out
that
of
one.
our time capsule.
Or someone could take that to their home. It probably is still a decently charged fire extinguisher, but it would not pass an inspection. That one would. I'm sure the other ones would. 10, in a fire emergency, at what point should you evacuate and not use the extinguisher? Anytime you feel unsafe, leave the building, call the fire department, or contact Chloe, because she knows how to operate a fire. Number 11, switching gears a little bit. What is violence in the workplace? This is any act or threat of physical or psychological violence that happens here. And it's a really large, it's a really large, wide spectrum of behavior. It could be something as straightforward as one employee was yelling at another employee. That could be considered violence in the workplace. It could be a patient who became verbally or physically abusive with one of you. It could be homicidal behavior that happened here. It's really a wide spectrum. And healthcare has 4 times greater workplace violence than the industry average. You all work in healthcare. So at some point during your career, if it hasn't happened already, you're probably going to experience some sort of violence. And again, it doesn't have to be someone shooting someone else. It could be another type of violent behavior. And why is that? I think part of the reason is healthcare is where people who are ill or anxious or stressed go to get better. And that is already a tipping point for someone acting maybe in a non-conventional manner. Also, bills. People pay bills, or they don't want to pay bills, or they disagree with the bill, and that can sort of escalate a situation. Number 12, what are some warning signs of potentially violent individuals? So, potentially is the key word here. If someone is always talking about weapons or acts of violence, that potentially means that they're going to become violent at some point. If someone is making threats, written or oral threats, that's a potential warning sign. Even a romantic obsession could be a warning sign. Let me explain that one. Let's say one of you's in a relationship with someone, and it was going along great until it didn't, so then we broke that relationship off, but maybe that other person's not ready for that relationship to end, so they decide to come and stalk you at your workplace. Or maybe they come into your workplace and let you and everybody else know how unhappy that they are that you've ended this relationship. So don't date. That's not an OSHA thing. 13, what are some risk factors? Abuse of drugs and alcohol is a major risk factor, as you might expect. But there are some other risk factors that you might not expect. So here's a risk factor. When you leave work right now, do you leave when it's dark?
Yes.
Yeah. And where do you all park? Or where do you...
Well, most of us.
Most of you where?
There's a sign seat or sign parking down underneath us,
Okay.
and then others just park on the street.
Park on the street.
Yeah.
Park on the street.
And when you leave, how's the lighting when it's dark? Is it okay?
Me.
Does anyone ever feel unsafe when you leave? Yes? I see a lot of nodding. Okay. So if you ever feel unsafe, there's not a perfect answer to this situation, but if you can, come back in and get someone to go out with you. That's a nice option, safety in numbers. But always feel that you've got 911 that you can always call if you feel, yeah, there's something going on out there, or there's a person there that I don't trust. Always feel like you can have some sort of secure personnel come and assist you in that situation. Uncomfortable waiting rooms or overcrowded waiting rooms could be a risk factor. Does that ever happen here? Does it ever get really crowded out there? Yeah. Yeah, when I think about the DMV, whenever I've gone to the DMV, it's always just full of people. There's not a seat. I don't want to sit by that guy. You Even the people that work there they don't seem to be real happy about working there. So, and, you know, rooms where there's too many people in one small space, that can be a risk factor. Okay. And certainly exchange of money or exchange of insurance information, that can be a risk factor. You probably see that up front where people disagree with whatever you're telling them. You know. 14, how should you handle an angry person or a violent situation? So I'm going to ask the two of you because you're both up front.
Calmly.
Calmly. Okay. What else? Any other tips? Somebody's getting really irate.
Compassionately.
Yes.
Yeah, compassion.
It's always escalating to a manager.
Yes. Absolutely. No, those are all really good. Try to stay calm and cool if you can. Try to empathize. Allow that person to be heard. Sometimes people just need to get it out. They just need to say whatever it is that's on their mind. And if you ever feel, yep, this has gotten out of hand, I need to have somebody come in. Sometimes just that third person, if it's an authority figure or a doctor, that's definitely a good thing. But even anyone, you know, there's somebody walking by, come in here, please, just stand here beside me. That can help diffuse the situation.
We also try to pull the patient into a treatment room, so we get her out of the public.
Oh,
And then
good.
we can talk to her one-on-one.
Good, so that doesn't disturb the regular or the other.
And she just de-escalates without the crowd. The patient will de-escalate without the crowd.
So, things to remember, never be accusatory and never raise your volume. If somebody is yelling at you, I know sometimes it feels like we need to match their volume, but that usually doesn't work out so well. There are some do's and don'ts that live in the front of this manual for how to handle people who are a little angry. So this would be good safety meeting topics as well. Number 15. 15 is a sensitive topic. We're going to talk about it because it is a real and persistent threat. What if an active shooter is in your facility and how would you respond? So in this case, we're talking about an active shooter is in this office. No, not this particular. Somewhere in this facility. Okay. Active shooter, they have a lot of similarities. Many times an active shooter scenario is over very quickly, many times before law enforcement arrives. So if that's the case, it's going to be up to you to save yourself. Because an active shooter, their goal is to shoot people and kill people. That's all they want to do. So if this ever happens here, the first thing I want you to try to do, if you can, is to run. Get out. Get out of this building. How many exits do we have? I know we got
1, 2, 3, 4.
Four. There's one in the
There's one
corner.
In a treatment room.
Right over here. Here.
Well, he has an exit
Four.
and then the 3 for the staff.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. That's great. There are a lot of offices that I go to that have 2.
3.
There are some that I go to that only have 1 exit. I don't see how that's legal, but whatever. But having 4 exits is great. So forget about active shooter for a second. Anytime there's any sort of an emergency where you need to evacuate the building, you should feel good that you've got 4 different options. So if there was a fire right here, obviously we don't need to get out this door. Okay? If there was a shooter in this room, one of the other exits would be ideal. So that's option number 1. Get out of the building. Go far away. Don't go to the shepherd's place. I'm sorry, I can't remember the name. Shepherd's Coney. Yeah, don't go over there. Go further away than that. Go somewhere until you feel safe. If there's maybe a business somewhere around here where there are a bunch of big, strong guys that work, maybe that's a good place to go. Okay. Certainly, if there's any law enforcement, that's a good option. Number 2, if you cannot run, I want you to hide. There are probably a lot of places here where you could hide. Some of you may have hidden there last week because you didn't. Where's a good hiding place? Tell me a good hiding place. Here.
Under here. Not your boots are not under the desk.
Under a desk. Under a
Do each
desk
of
is
the
good.
individual patient rooms lock?
No,
No.
not unlocked.
Unlocked.
Then
Bathrooms.
bathrooms.
Bathroom's locked. That's a
Yeah.
good one.
Closets.
Laundry bin.
Laundry bin.
Yeah.
Wait, no, I don't like it.
That's no joke. I'd file something.
Hey, if someone's shooting the place up, if you can get behind or under a solid object, that's pretty good. If it locks, that's even better. Being behind a glass door or a glass window, not ideal. If you're in the front, unfortunately, just standing there is not ideal, but you could get under your desk. or under the front. So, let's say for some reason you couldn't run and you couldn't hide. As a last option, I want you to fight, because right now you're fighting for your life. Law enforcement is not here yet. Use whatever you have available to defend yourself. If there are sharp instruments somewhere in here, use those. Scissors. Use a fire extinguisher. Squeeze that sucker. Or throw it at somebody. They're pretty heavy. If you got hit with a fire extinguisher, you would know it. Use whatever you can to defend yourself in this situation. 16, how do you respond when law enforcement arrives? Their first purpose is to subdue the shooter. They don't know any of you. The shooter may have decided to dress like one of you today, or dress as a healthcare professional. So I want you to greet the law enforcement with your hands spread, your fingers spread, and your hands above your head. Do not still have any of your weapons or your cell phone or your pens in your hand at this time, okay? Be as non-threatening as possible. And 17, what information do you provide to the responding officers? Whatever you've got. If you can describe the shooter or any identifying features, please share that information, or if you've seen a weapon, or if there have been victims. Whatever you have, offer that and then get out of their way. And 18, once you've reached a safe location, what do? Stay there until they take your statement, then they'll release you. And number 19, does your facility have a workplace violence program in place? Or do you have any sort of workplace violence policy? A written policy?
Yes.
So, two weeks, right? 2 weeks?
Yes.
Okay. So 2 weeks ago, when you probably that first day you had a bunch of paperwork to sign. Right? You did sign all the paperwork. I'm kidding. Because if you didn't, you're not on the payroll. Which means you're not really. You don't have to be. No, I'm kidding. So during that, do you remember seeing anything about workplace violence anywhere in there?
Not sure.
I'm not picking on you. I'm just asking. It's okay. Not sure. All right. So in our manual, right now, I want to let you know that there's currently not a standard in place that requires you to have a policy about workplace violence. However, in 2018, legislation was introduced to Congress titled the Healthcare Anti-Violence Workplace Standard. And so at some point, it's going to be a law that you're required to have some sort of policy here. So, with that being said, back in the Accident Prevention Program section, which is what we're talking about. By the way, if you're ever in this manual and you're looking for something, behind every section, there's a table of contents which should help you figure out what it is you're looking for. Section 9, by the way, is all about violence in the workplace. So if you're ever needing some extra safety meeting topics, or something happens here and you want to address it, it should be somewhere in this section. Section 10, there are 3 forms I want to alert you to. The first one is a violence incident report. Anytime anything ever happens here of a violent nature, please make a report of it. If a patient is getting violent with one of you, or if an employee is getting violent with another employee, you need to keep a record of that. Because without a written record of it, did it happen? I don't know. Okay. Second sheet, there's an assessment worksheet. This helps you determine your level of potential violence in the workplace. This is a really good worksheet. I recommend you do this. And then finally, there is a sample policy in here. I see that my colleague Karen might have written your name right there. So this is a sample 4-page workplace violence policy. It's very comprehensive. On the back page there's a place to sign and date for every individual. Right now, it's in the manual. This is not your workplace violence policy. You have not adopted this. No one has read it, and it's not in any of your personnel records. This is like January 1st buying a Stairmaster, and what today? January 17th?
16th.
Now on the 16th it becomes a nice place to hang your clothes in your bedroom. Okay? So you need to actually put this into place. So you can customize it to your own facility. It doesn't need to be quite this comprehensive, but you should have something in writing. So I recommend you do that. Good, that was it on accident prevention. Any questions about accidents? No. Excellent. Are we hanging in there? You okay in the back? You look very, I think you're gonna need maybe some healthcare professional. It looks very uncomfortable. Okay, we're gonna move on to bloodborne pathogen standard. Number 20, what does this law deal with? This is all about biological hazards, disease, waste, exposure incidents. It lives in your manual under Exposure Control Plan, Section 14. This is the law right here. The Department of Labor provides this law for your employers, and they're required to follow it, which means all of you are required to follow it. Number 21, what biohazardous waste do you generate? So if you have any sharps or sharps containers, that could be biohazardous waste. If you ever have gauze that would be so saturated that it was squeezable and it would drip, that would be biohazardous waste. Okay. 22, what disposal methods do you use with this waste? So your sharps containers at point of use, and then a biohazard box with a red bag, that would be your disposal methods. 23, is your biohazardous waste covered appropriately? Should be. And 24, who's your biohazardous waste hauler? Who do you use for
Waste management.
waste management? Good. And where do you keep your disposal records for those transactions?
In files.
In files. Okay. OSHA would like to see 3+ years for records like that. Actually, most records, OSHA would like to see a paper trail of 3+ years. 25, does your facility have access to site-specific information, and where would you find this information? Yes, you do. In the very front of the manual, Section 2, is all of your site-specific information. It's right here. So this is everything from your emergency action plan to all your documentation and record keeping, who your biohazardous waste hauler is, things of that nature. It all lives right here in Section 2. And 26, where would your facility receive emergency medical treatment following an exposure or a chemical incident? Where are you going to go if somebody has an accident?
Good Sam.
Good Sam.
I think they're the closest.
This one says Westover Heights Clinic.
Oh, they don't. They closed.
Oh, they closed. Okay. And then the alternative was NCNM Clinic.
No, that's
No,
far away.
No. No.
No,
And then a third one is Good Sam Hospital.
no, Good Sam's first.
So we'll want to update this page. There's another page in there that we can update. 27. What chemicals are used here? And forgive me, this is my first time here, so I don't know all of the things that you do or you don't do, but I'm approaching this as kind of just general healthcare. What chemicals are used here for disinfection of your treatment rooms? Cavi wipes. Okay. And 28, what method of application do you use with this chemical? It sounds like wipes, obviously. Do you ever spray as well? Do you, no sprays. Good. 29, what personal protective equipment do you wear when using the Cavi wipes? Wear your gloves. And 30, how long must the Cavi wipes remain in contact with the surface for them to be effective as a disinfectant? 2 minutes?
Something like that. I think it's like 3 to 5 minutes.
3 to 5 minutes? Anyone else? How many people, out of show of hands, use the Cavi wipes on a regular basis? A lot of you. Okay, good. So this is something, if you were inspected, this could be a question that an OSHA compliance officer might ask you. And this would be something you would want to definitely know the answer to if you use these on a regular basis. I recommend for your next safety meeting that you talk about Cavi wipes. That's a good idea. I believe, and I'm not sure exactly which product you have, but it's probably 3 minutes. 3 minutes. 31, the 3 main bloodborne diseases of concern to healthcare workers are HIV, Hep B, and Hep C. And 32, how are bloodborne diseases potentially transmitted here, and what are your chances of contracting a disease? They're potentially transmitted via needle stick, as you might expect, but they could also be, there are some other transmission methods, but we're going to talk about needle sticks right now. what are your chances of contracting one of these diseases via a needle stick? This is data from the CDC. HIV is up first. HIV,
0.03.
point 1/3% to 1%. Very good. You can do the rest. Go ahead. And HIV can live outside the body for about 20 seconds. That's a pretty short shelf life. Hep B. Hep B, do you know Hep B?
0.6.
6 to 30%. 6 to 30% chance of contracting Hep B. However, almost 0% if you've been vaccinated. Has everybody been vaccinated for Hep B in this room? Is there anybody who's not been vaccinated?
Why would
Okay. Hep B can live outside the body at least 7 days. So it's got some length to it. And it can actually be reactivated. If it was in dried blood and the clock stopped ticking, and then the blood gets re-moistened, the clock starts ticking once again. It's kind of scary. Hep C is 1.8 to 7% chance of contracting it. Hep C can live outside the body at room temperature on an environmental surface for up to 3 weeks. And there are a lot of people walking around with Hep C who may not know they're carrying Hep C. On a side note, this is not OSHA thing, this is a Brian thing. If you're at the grocery store and you're going to use a grocery cart, please wipe it down with one of those little wipes.
Yeah.
Because those things are really gross, in my opinion. They're kind of gross. That's Brian thing. Okay, 33, what is hand hygiene? Hand hygiene, this is simply washing your hands with soap and water or using antiseptic hand rub or hand wash. 34, what are the techniques for using alcohol-based hand sanitizers? We don't happen to have one of those in here, do we?
And there's one.
There's one at the front desk.
All right. I'm gonna show you 2 things not to do. Imagine I have a pump in my hand. So the first thing you don't do, you don't put a little pea-sized dot on the palm of your hand. You need to do actually the full pump, and you get, I don't know, maybe a quarter size or a $half size segment of antiseptic hand rub. And then you need to rub vigorously for about 10 to 15 seconds. Don't do it for 2 seconds and then air dry or try to take off your fingers. You want to rub your hands vigorously together between your fingers, drag your nails, hit your cuticles, hit your knuckles. You have a lot of wrinkles and little tiny spaces on your fingers where things can house. Okay, you want to get rid of those. 35. Why do we practice hand hygiene? Because it does reduce the spread of germs and the risk of infection. And 36. What are the techniques for washing hands with soap and water? This seems kind of silly. We've all been doing that since we were little kids, but maybe we're not doing it right, so I'll let you know. So first thing you do is you get your hands wet. And then you apply the recommended amount of product. Do the same activity between the fingers, all that, 10 to 15 seconds. Rinse your fingers and your hands off, and then stop. Don't do what you want to do, because right now everybody wants to turn the water off, because we're all very water conscious. We want to conserve our water. But before you turn the water off, please use a disposable towel to dry your hands off, and then you use the same towel to turn the water off. And then if you happen to be in the bathroom, use the same towel to open up the door to get out of the restroom. Because once you take your clean hands and you touch a contaminated surface, you're just sort of going against everything you just were there to do. 37. Do you offer Hep B vaccines to all staff members or just the required clinical staff?
Just the required clinical staff.
That's right. Right. So if there are individuals who are 100% non-clinical, they're not required to have the Hep B immunization offered to them. And 38, once you're immunized against Hep B, how long does the protection last? Back row, this is a question for you. How long does the protection last? What do you think? Laptop. 7 years. So the manufacturers recommend 12. Every 12 you get a titer. But the data supports that it'll last about, or the immunologic memory will last about 20 years. So if you think you're outside of the 12 to 20 year window, maybe you want to get a titer. 39, what PPE do you wear when you have a risk of exposure to bloodborne pathogens? gloves,
Mask.
mask, glasses.
Shoes.
Well, you should be wearing shoes all the time.
Like cinch.
Overgarment. So all four of those, overgarment, gloves, mask, and eyewear. And 40, why do you need to wear PPEs in this facility? Because you are exposed to bloodborne pathogens and because your employer is required by that law that I showed you earlier. 41, can an employee refuse to wear any or all of the required PPE? This is kind of a trick question. Yeah, they can. They can refuse. An employee can refuse. Most likely, if an employee refuses to wear any or all required PPE, you won't be an employee any longer. Because they're required to provide that stuff for you. 42, when do you need to remove your PPE? Anytime you're going into a non-clinical area, if you were wearing gloves or a mask, for example, please remove your PPE. We're in a non-clinical room right now, yes? Yeah. The lobby and the front office is non-clinical. The bathrooms are non-clinical. I'm sure there's a break room or something downstairs. No. This is not a break room. Oh, this is the break room. So, if you're in a non-clinical area, please remove your PPE. Here's another tip for you. So, you potentially, I just saw that. Potentially, you have a violation right here in this room, right in front of me, in this trash can.
There's a glove in there.
There's a glove in this trash can. So the perception when you see a glove in a trash can in a non-clinical area that there is cross-contamination. Because I don't know, and the inspector doesn't know where that glove came from. Was it being used with a clinical procedure? Maybe it was. Maybe it wasn't. No one knows. So if you're ever have gloves or a mask on and you need to discard them, put them in a clinical area trash can. The fine for that is $7,500 per item. It's a big fine. Okay. I don't say that to scare you, I just say that to bring your level of awareness up. 43, what does a PPE overgarment look like? It has long sleeves, goes to the end of your wrist. The cuff is elastic, also goes to the base of your neck, and it should be minimally fluid resistant. .44, when would you need to wear utility gloves? Do you do sterilization here? Do you have any, are all of your instruments disposable? Okay, good. Do you have any chemicals here where you have to use utility gloves to handle the chemicals? Then you shouldn't need utility gloves here. After Thanksgiving dinner, if you're cleaning up, I recommend utility. 45, if your facility don't worry about that one. 46, is your facility required to perform an annual assessment of your OSHA program that includes the evaluation of devices that have safety features built into them? Yes, we're going to talk about that afterward, don't worry about that. 48, 47, what is an engineering control? What are some examples? Engineering controls, that was a bike. That's workplace violence right there. Engineering controls help keep you safe from bloodborne pathogens. So for example, your PPE or your Hep B vaccinations, a Sharps container, something like that. And 48, what work practice controls do you put into place each day to maintain your safety? The number one thing you do as a healthcare professional is you wash your hands all the time. 49, what actions do you take if you have a bloodborne exposure incident? What OSHA forms need to be available to you following an on-the-job incident? And where would you find this paperwork? So, I think I saw that maybe in August of last year you had a needle stick, is that right? Okay. Did everything go okay afterwards? Everything was fine? Okay. If you have a needle stick, this is what you do. Open up exposure control plan. And to the table of contents, you're looking for post-exposure. And you'll find it right there, section 10, post-exposure. Flip to section 10. There are 6 pages here that tell you exactly what you need to do, what you need to know in terms of exposure, okay, or post-exposure. There's even a flow chart here on page 4 that shows you what to do. It tells you all the forms you need, which all live back here in section 15, right there. And number 50, How soon after an exposure incident do you seek medical care?
Immediately.
Right away, yes. At least within 4 hours. That was it for bloodborne pathogen standard. Let's move on to hazard communication standard. I know I'm moving through this really quickly. If I'm moving too quickly, please ask me to repeat something. 51, what does this law deal with? This is all about chemical safety and chemical exposure. It lives in HAZCOM, section 14 again. This is an even bigger and more extensive law than the bloodborne pathogen standard. So if any of you suffer from insomnia, take this home and read it. It's kind of boring. 52, what does SDS stand for?
Safety data.
Safety data sheet, very good. 2 weeks on. That $1,000 gift card. Did you bring the gift cards? Just see Nikki, she's got it somewhere. She just has to find it. And where do they come from? Do you know where the SDS come from? Manufacturer. Very good. 53, what information is contained on an SDS? Pretty much all you need to know about that chemical. So the health hazards and the exposure risks. How to clean it up, how to dispose of it. What PPE are required. If you need to know about it, it's on there. By the way, do we have these posted anywhere in the office? Anyone ever seen these?
There's one in the laundry.
Yeah.
I think there's one in the laundry. No,
These are the globally harmonized system pictograms. 36 countries have adopted these. So that no matter which country you're in, you don't have to read their language, you just have to read that little picture. You'll also see these pictograms on your secondary container labels, if you ever have a secondary container. 54, what steps do you take if there's a chemical spill in your facility? Now, we're not talking about a big global chemical spill where we need to contact Multnomah County. We're talking about somebody spilled a little chemical here. So let's say I spilled a chemical right here on the floor. First thing we want to do, evacuate this immediate area and consult the SDS for the spill and leak response. And then we want to clean it up according to the SDS directions. And then report it to a supervisor or report it to one of the owners. So evacuate, consult, clean it up, and report it. 55. This is for all you new people. You have all these required manuals. You know, you got the OSHA manual, and you have safety committee manual, and your SDS manual. Do you all know where they live? Do you know where the manuals live?
My assumption is that in one of these conveyor offices, no? No? That's where everything else
They're at
is.
the front desk.
Oh, okay.
So they actually live right up there by you. So whatever that first cabinet is, right, I don't know, right there above the front desk.
Oh, okay.
That's where they live.
Sure.
You haven't read that?
I know.
56, is this facility training employees on all hazardous chemicals used here? If you have a hazardous chemical that is here and living here, you should have a meeting about it, everyone should know about it. I don't know if you do have a hazardous
We have
chemical.
Cavi wipes is the most
Cavi
chemical.
wipe is it, okay. We're gonna have a meeting about Cavi wipe. 57, how long are you required to keep an SDS if you no longer use the product?
10 years?
30 years,
30 years.
long time, basically forever. And the reason for that is, let's say that one of you 15 years from now comes down with some illness that we didn't even know existed in 2019, and the investigators are looking and they see, oh, this person worked in a healthcare office. I wonder if that healthcare office had this particular chemical that we know now has a relationship to this illness, so they're going to go back and do some investigation. 58, does your facility have an active and an inactive SDS book on file? Yes, you do. And 59, where's your chemical spill kit located?
Kitchen.
In the kitchen. Where's the kitchen?
The laundry room.
In the laundry room.
That's where I'm going to be hiding.
And what items are required? You should have an absorbent material like kitty litter, and a whisk broom and a dustpan, safety glasses and utility gloves, tongs, and a Snickers bar. The Snickers bar is optional, but you do get hangry sometimes if you're cleaning chemicals. 60, are you required to have a mercury spill kit? Do you all have blood pressure cuffs in this? And are they the old? Oh, they're the old guys? No, mercury. Then you're not required to have a mercury spill kit. And 61, do you know where to access first aid supplies here? Where do you all get a Band-Aid or something like that?
Front desk, kitchen, or lab.
Front desk, kitchen, or lab. Okay, a lot of places. Now, there have been a rash of first aid kits being stolen. Have you heard about this? No, I made that up. That's not true. But if your first aid kit is ever stolen, here's a list of items for a basic first aid kit. 62, are all secondary containers labeled and legible? They should be. If they're not, they should be. And sometimes I'm asked, what do you mean by secondary container? So this is the primary container. This moisturizing cream from TJ's came in this primary container. If I were to take a secondary container and put it in here, this would now be the secondary container. It would need a label on it. Okay.
So like alcohol.
Alcohol.
Hydrogen peroxide. Are the two things that we have.
And 63, what chemical hazardous waste do you generate and how do you dispose of it? Do you have any chemical hazardous waste? Probably not. So we don't need 64 or 65. 66, where's your eye wash station located?
Kitchen.
In the kitchen. Do you flush it on a regular basis? So, and I'll have to take a look at which kind you have, but if it's the kind with the little rubber caps on top, like the little green rubber caps, the bacteria can build up pretty quickly in those rubber, what do you call those things? So the last thing you want to do, there's two last things you want to do. If you need eye wash because you've gotten chemicals or something in your eye, so when you go to the eye wash station, the last thing you want is not to now put bacteria in your eye. So please flush them on a weekly basis. And the other thing you don't want is you don't want hot water rolling into your eye. So if this is connected to hot water, make sure that hot water never exceeds 100 degrees. And last question, 67, are you doing the appropriate chemical exposure monitoring? I don't think you're using cold sterile here with an aldehyde. You're not doing spore testing because you don't do any sterilization. You don't have nitrous or anything like that, so that's good. So that was it, all 67 questions. You all did great. We're gonna bypass the quiz because I can tell you would all get 100% anyway. Two more quick things. Number one, safety doesn't happen by accident. Safety happens on purpose. Safety happens because you're being purposely safe at work. So keep doing all the good things you're doing. You've only had that one exposure incident. How long before that other one? Had you had? I mean, how long had it been?
What was our last needle stick? Maybe a couple of years before.
And it's never been an employee. It's always been a provider. Yeah.
It's always been.
Generally because somebody puts the needles and the sharps the wrong way.
Okay. So make sure your sharps containers, as they fill up and they get to that fill line. If they get to that fill line or get close to that fill line, get rid of them, empty them, do whatever it is you do, because the higher that level gets, the more likely when you put the new item in that you can get a poke. Okay. Second thing, physician's resource. We have $100 to offer somebody in this room, and this is how you can earn this $100. So if you know of another healthcare facility or dental practice or veterinary practice or medical, whatever it is, who is not currently a client of ours and who needs some OSHA consultation, please refer them to me. I will talk to them and see if they want to become a client of ours. If they're trying to do it all themselves, they're trying to do this training by themselves and fulfill all their monthly obligations, my guess is they probably would fail an inspection. So if you know somebody like that, let me know, send me an email, send me a phone call or call me, and I'll talk to them. If I sign them up, I'll pay one of you $100. I'll actually do that for anyone who sends me a referral who signs up with us. Okay. Cool. Any questions for me? Good. You've all been very good. Keep doing all the good stuff. Thank you.